Hello everyone, I'm Roxy Hunt. I'm one of the festival directors of the Lower East Side Film Festival. This is our 10th year. It happens to be virtual this year, but we're really excited to host two amazing filmmakers today in conversation with each other about their careers, their films, and also the adaptability of independent filmmaking. And when we're faced with certain obstacles, pandemic or not, indie filmmakers face a lot of obstacles in their careers. So I think both of you guys have had some really amazing work, some really interesting work, and a lot of diverse work too. I think that's one thing I wanted to hit on today too is, you have a variety of different films, different types of films. There's sort of some mixing of genres. You have experience with narrative, comedy, some documentary in there. Like there's a lot of different stuff in both of your canons of work. And also you're both kind of part of the LESFF family. Rebecca, we're so honored to have you join our jury panel. And Shaina, you're an alumni filmmaker, and you also have a film in the festival this year, Blunderpuss, which we can talk more about too. So yeah, I just wanted to welcome you guys both here. Thanks for being here. And just to kind of kick things off, like I mentioned, I think you both have a variety of different styles in your filmmaking and a lot of different kinds of stories. But they're also you as filmmakers shine through 100%. So I'm just curious to kind of kick it off. How will you, define your voice as a filmmaker, even though you've kind of changed things up film to film? And again, I encourage you guys to ask questions to each other. Don't let me be the only one. But Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind starting it off, kind of telling us.
I was hoping I wasn't going to be the first one. Okay, to define my voice. I don't know. It's really tough. Like, I do believe that people, if they make work honestly, it's like a self-portrait every time, even if you're doing science fiction or, mystery stories or somebody else's script. It's something you can't help but kind of do a self-portrait of sorts. And so I think that, I look back on my earlier films and earliest film, and I could not make that film again. It was a film called Angela. I would not be able to do it again, and you can't go back. So in a sense, I suppose that I'm honestly trying to express who I am right this second and how I see the world right now versus and it gets tricky because, of course, as filmmakers, we know that it takes years often, more times than not, to get a film made. So you just have to keep thinking, well, that script, which I wrote in some cases 10 years ago, that I can finally get to make, is going to be this director's interpretation of that writer's work, even if you're the writer. So in other words, it's you have to accept that you evolve. And I think that I hope that I don't try to repeat myself or get too nostalgic about somebody I sort of wish I still was. I mean, I think it's the thing is to keep moving and being honest about what you like and what you want to see and what you'd want to go see at the movies,
Yeah, and I think you bring up an interesting point too, that it's a reflection of yourself. So is it hard to look back at past selves and see how much you've grown or changed, or even when you're in the middle of something that's going to take years and years, to continue to be committed to that original self, even though you as a filmmaker might be changing along the way?
Well, in my case, I think that I have been lucky enough to be able to sustain interest in the things that have, in fact, the longest thing was a film called The Ballad of Jack and Rose, which did take 10 years, and I rewrote it several times. I started it as just a daughter and saw it all from the point of view of it was a father-daughter team, and the two main characters. And by the end, I was a parent, and I started to think of it much more in terms of the parent. And so I rewrote it in a way, looking at it as much from his point of view as the child's point of view. But I think there are probably times where you just wait too long and you're done, it's cooked. I don't know. It hasn't happened to me yet, and I hope it doesn't, but it can, because our business moves so slowly. Really, most of the time, it moves really slowly, at least for me.
And Shaina, tell us a little bit about your work. Your films are very personal, and you know, in terms of each film being a self-portrait. I like that Rebecca said that, because a lot of your films definitely feel like self-portraits. And give us a little insight into that, you know, framework.
Well, I guess I also want to address something that Rebecca said, which is that our business works really slowly, and I anything I've done that's been like bigger and had more people involved has taken so long. Like funding, I guess anything that has like actual funding takes so much longer to do, and you do have to like sustain that sort of like excitement about your project for so much longer. But with my own movies, the 3 features I've made were just made each for 15 grand, and so each one I feel like I just was like, this is like burning a hole in me right now, and then I just did it. And I think that as I like grow as a filmmaker, I really am trying to encourage myself to sit with a topic longer and make it better. But so far I've had the sort of privilege of just being like, okay, I'm gonna just make this thing right now that is like burning a hole in my brain. So I guess, you know, as I grow and get more involved with other people and production companies and things like that, I'm noticing that I have to like really sustain something for a lot longer. I can't even imagine sustaining something for 10 years. But like that, I guess that's what happens. Like when you read about these like bigger movies that go further, you see like there's this real trajectory that like took a long time in the making. But anyways, but that's just sort of came up.
Well, can I ask you a question then, like, about when you say you've made movies for 15 grand, which definitely tops even my lowest budget films. Are you using people who like really don't get paid and then they just you know, get a piece of it if it should make money down the line? Or how do you create a crew? Or is it so tiny that it's just you and your best friend? Or how do you?
It's so tiny. It's me. It started as me and my husband and our friend. And the first movie we made, which it premiered at the Lower East Side Film Festival in 2016, was called The Babymooners. The crew was 3 people. The movie had a few more people. It was mainly me and my husband on camera, and then my parents were in it, and a couple friends were in it. But mostly it was us. So when my husband was on camera, I was doing sound, and when I was on camera, he was doing sound. And sometimes when we were both on camera, we then did the sound later. Like we filmed ourselves so far away that you couldn't see our mouths move. So that's kind of how we've just been like super creative with how we put it together. And then we just have a tiny crew. Our second movie had like 5 crew members, and our third movie had maybe 6 or 7.
That seems like that's all you kind of need. I mean, 3 is like really hard. I would have a lot of trouble with that, but yeah, so that's interesting. So the one I saw was Senior Escort Service. So that would have been how big of a crew?
That was like at the most, like we filmed it in chunks because we had 15 grand to do it. So we filmed it like 4 days here, 4 days there, you know, like that.
When everyone was free.
What?
When everyone was free, or?
Yes, exactly. Like, and I was renting the equipment, so I would be like, oh, I'll rent it for a long weekend, and I would get like a special price, you know. So we would do like, we did it in June, July, August, September, and each of those months we filmed for 4 days. And so the biggest crew we had was 5 people, but some of the days it was just my DP and me. But yeah, so it was very tiny crew. But you know, we've done some other things, like we've done a series for Brick TV, which we've done 2 seasons of, and that we have like a bigger crew of 8 people, you know. But I agree, like I don't think like I've gotten to be on set on bigger movies, and I understand why there's all those people, but to me that feels sort of overwhelming, and it's just not how I'm used to working. And I think it's an interesting time now with COVID that we're gonna have to like be working, like I feel like the crews are gonna have to be smaller.
Yeah, even the bigger movies, we have to like, everybody has to pare it down and figure out how to get more space between people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, basically we've done it where, you know, it's, you know, just stretching the money and using, I mean, I think our movies could have benefited from having more time to do them, but in some cases, you know, some cases I'm like, I'm really proud of that thing, but there's other moments where I'm like, I wish we had all day just for this one scene, and we didn't, because we, you know, we're paying an actor to be there for one day. So yeah, I think like basically we just stretched the dollar and had these skeleton crews.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Shaina, you bring up an interesting point too about sort of being forced to make creative choices based on different constraints like money or time or whatever. You know, I'm curious, Rebecca, too, in your work, are there times where, you know, different obstacles or situations arose where you had to make a choice that ended up being, you know, for the better because of those obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind most obviously was Personal Velocity, which was a lower budget film. It was $250,000. So that was, we made it in 16 days. It was with this company called Indigent that was run by Gary Winnick. Anyway, the point is we had 16 days to shoot the feature film, and we had no overtime and so on. And so when I wrote the script, it had to be pretty trim, and there were things that I wanted to put in that I just didn't have time to shoot. And so I came up with this idea that to decide to use stills with voiceover and music for some of that. And it ended up being that the stills ended up being kind of a signature kind of look for the film, and it really kind of, I think, deepened it and allowed you to really just look at these stills and contemplate these women's, because it was like three women's at a crossroads in their lives, essentially. It was called Personal Velocity 3 Portraits. And so it was meant to be really portraits of these women. So it was nice to have these moments of just contemplating these women and being with them when, you know, the movement had ceased. And that was definitely a response to not having enough money, because of course we could shoot these MOS, these without sound sequences, and then pick stills from them, which is what we did because we shot in video. This was the very early days of video. Nobody was shooting in video at that time. So
Yeah.
I think, and I really love that about that movie. I also, and have you seen Husbands recently?
yes.
Like that, I think the beginning of that movie is the best part of that movie, and that's those stills with like the audio underneath.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
I just assumed that he did that also for financial restraints or
Maybe.
so sometimes like the best parts of movies come out of not having, you know, I mean, we can see also there's these huge movies that are made for gazillions of dollars and they're kind of dumb, you know, but it's like there's so much money that goes into like some CGI thing or whatever, and you're like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just not my thing, but like, I do think that when you have, you know, you have to be sort of thrifty. I think it can create like really interesting outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like you said, there's moments where you just could have used a little bit more time. And then there's times where invention, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And then you kind of got lucky by the fact that you didn't have what you needed. I do think that as you go on, you know, without getting totally greedy, there is a moment where you just want a little bit more time to be able to play and explore. And that's something that I've found, like that, you know, I'm willing to do whatever I have to do, but there's a moment where it's a natural kind of thing where you just feel like, I just want to try a couple more things. I would like a crane today, you know, something like that. You know, I want to get high up. But then, you know, if you can't, if you need to, you invent ways of doing that, or you just keep certain scripts back that aren't possible to be shot in that way. And that's the other thing, is that, when I got the offer to do Personal Velocity, Gary wanted to do one of a film, but I had other scripts, but I didn't want to do any of them. I knew I couldn't do them in that way, so it was like I had to create that script so that I could do it that way, because Jack and Rose, I knew I couldn't make that in such a short time like that, because of the set. So
yeah, I mean, I was going to say, you bring up an interesting point too about maybe writing in a way of doing something that you can get done, and how does that, I'm just curious, in the writing process, how do you shape your script in a way like where you're keeping maybe budget in the back of your mind and going, does that force you to make decisions that you can't rely on with like special effects or that kind of thing, but you have to draw out that narrative just with dialogue or
I mean, I think I suffer from that, actually. I think my writing would be better if I didn't constantly think, can I shoot this at my mom's house or at my house? Like, I've now, my husband and I have a tiny production company. It's just the two of us, and then we crew up for gigs. And we've been hired now in the last few years to create work for other people, not just for entities. And sometimes, like, they come to us with a script that has like a cat in a stroller and someone on a unicycle riding past juggling, and like, seriously, that is a scene that was in one of the things, and I was like, we could never make this. But then the producer of the project like made that happen. So I think sometimes I actually am thinking too much about my budget when I write, and like, clearly this person who wrote that script wasn't thinking like, well, how much does a cat cost? They were just like, I think this is funny. I mean, I think for me, that's like something that I'm trying I would like to get out of at some point. Like, I still, for the most part, I mean, this last season that I filmed of Dinette, we filmed in January, and like, we got things that I never had dreamed. Like, we got a church and a marching band, like things that from a project that was just funded by me, or like by like, was made for 15 grand, we wouldn't have been able to afford. So that was really cool. But I'd like to like try to think bigger too. I don't know. Do you have that? Do you feel like you're held back by?
Well, there are definitely times where I either, like I said, like I'll write it, and then sometimes I just know I have to keep that one back until I get the money, and I have to do something else. Like there's actually a kind of a funny story that is a little bit about this, which is that I made this movie, The Private Lives of Pippa Lee, and in it there was a dream with a lion in it. And my producer, Lamore Sivan, kept saying like, the lion. So the lion, like, could we use like somebody in a lion suit? Could there be like a stuffed lion? And I was like, I really want a lion. Okay, so then we started looking for like stuffed lions, which ends up being more expensive apparently than anything, like to find actual, like lion skin. And finally she says, I think we found a lion. This is like 3 or 4 weeks into the shoot. I said, she said, yeah, it's like a bargain lion. Like, we found, it turned out this lion, the reason it was so inexpensive is that it had bitten somebody. So we had this really frightening lion that we did get the lion, but it had to be, staked into the ground. And we were very close to this lion. So be careful what you wish for. We did get the lion, and it was at a good price because it was a man-eating lion. But
but nothing bad happened.
No, I mean, there is a moment in the movie where you see it kind of crouches down, and I thought, oh God, it's gonna like eat us all. But that was one of the most frightening moments in my, because I was right behind I was holding cable behind the Steadicam operator, because I thought, well, I can't sit in a truck while everybody else is like approaching this lion. But generally the answer is, yeah. I mean, like, certainly with Personal Velocity, I was aware, even with Personal Velocity, like, because these video cameras that we were using had such crappy, the lenses weren't very good at wide shots. They were really better at close-ups. So we were just like, okay, so just medium shots and close-ups, and basically we won't have any wide shots. Those kinds of things, where you just like try to make lemonade out of lemons. I think it's part of being a filmmaker. I mean, I think that's what, what makes it different from being a novelist or a painter. You have to, that has to be part of how you think, but you don't want it to be, like you said, you don't want it to take over so much that your imagination, you know, gets overly. So I feel like sometimes you can write stuff that you can always put in a drawer and make it maybe later.
Yeah.
Have money.
I mean, I have also, like, you can make it a podcast. Like, that's something
Yes.
that my friend Meg Higgins and she and I had pitched and sold a TV show that wound up reverting back to us. And, you know, we had imagined it as a TV show, so it was a much bigger budget than like an indie movie. And then we wound up getting to make it for Audible as a podcast. And so, like, we did get to have, like, you know, all of this stuff in it that we would not have been able to afford in an indie movie setting, because it was just audio and you're just creating the world, you know, and also it's Audible, so it's actually like a bigger budget than an indie movie, but it's still like, it's just audio, so you're creating all of this, you know, world out of sound. So it's like easier to get a siren in sound than it is to get like a cop car.
It's actually a really good point, which is not only that podcasts are very liberating. I mean, I'm currently exactly the same situation where I had, Damon and I had a series that looks like it now may end up being a podcast, but also let's just like how much you can do with sound design and how actually important that is, and how much more you can do with, you know, you can do so much, you can go really deep with sound design on a lower budget film, and that can make a big difference in terms of you know, just the way people perceive the film. It has much more to do with how we perceive films than people realize.
Totally, that's true. Yeah, even like beyond podcast, even just an indie movie. Yeah, if you have like a close up on someone's face and then have all this stuff going on, or whatever it is, like just having good sound.
Yes.
Like makes a difference.
Yeah, agreed.
You guys bring up a good point too about it, you know, podcasts being such an amendable platform for lower budget. What do you guys think is the future of what we're going to start seeing now, you know, in this time, in time of pandemic? How will the studios adapt? You know, have you guys been talking to filmmakers that you know, or other folks trying to figure out what do we think is the path forward?
I'll take a stab.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there's going to be, you know, there's certain countries that are already like declaring success, right? So I think there's already shooting beginning in certain countries. And so I don't know what it's like for them in terms of, I think that they're probably following a lot of these new COVID-19 rules, but I think it might be a different situation than it is like here in the States. But I think that indie filmmakers are going to be able to kind of show the way in some respects, because I think we are going to have to really limit our crews. Like, we're not going to be able to have like 50 people standing around on their cell phones. So I think that people are going to be, you know, it's going to be more bare bones. That's what I'm imagining, at least for, you know, the foreseeable future. Like, I have no idea when there will be like a vaccine or what other thing is in our future. But my feeling is that it's going to at least start with smaller crews and really scaling down, and you know, that's what I'm imagining, which I feel like puts people like us in a better position to like sort of show the way.
I would agree with that. I think the people that I know who are making massive films have some of the same, of course, it's a different scale of scaling down. You know, they're probably scaled down crew is a bigger crew than we would be using anyway, but for sure. And I think, I do think it's you know, the biggest concern I have is really actors, because I personally make movies where people are intimate and close. I don't make movies where people are 6 feet away from each other. Not many people do. So, you know, that to me is like the whole question of quarantine and testing and making sure that, you know, whether do we all have to make movies where we're basically locked down together for a period of time? Those questions, I think I haven't heard like the definitive answer on that yet, but but I do think that we're in a good position as independent filmmakers and people who know how to make films with fewer people. I think that that will be definitely a good skill to have right now.
Has there been anything that you've been in the process of working on and have kind of had to either, I've heard from a lot of folks, it's just, we're pressing pause right now, we don't know what is going to happen. But I've also heard from some filmmakers that they, had a surge of inspiration during this time or something like that. I'm just curious, how has this time affected your work?
Well, I am, first of all, insane, so I have to keep making stuff constantly. But I also am homeschooling a 5-year-old because of the pandemic, so making stuff definitely looks really different. I mean, the whole pandemic makes making things look different, but also having a 5-year-old around all the time makes life and work different. So I have been working on a feature about my mom that's sort of like a follow-up to Senior Escort Service, and now I'm like, okay, I think it's gonna be a short film. And I've also been working on a film about my dog who's 17 and my sort of relationship to putting him down eventually. Mm-hmm. And I, at the beginning of March, filmed this whole meal with all these people who came and told me all these stories of them putting their animals to sleep, and then it was literally like the next weekend we were like, that would not have happened, so I was very lucky to get that footage. But basically all my projects are now kind of being like, I want to finish them, so I think they're going to be smaller. That's like sort of how I'm trying to respond to the moment. I think probably people who are less insane could wait until people could be in a room together. But I feel like for me, I sort of like can't stop until I'm done. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, for me, I have one thing that's a documentary that we're working on, and that I can research. So I've been doing a lot of research, which has been great, and a lot of watching movies and a lot of like reading books and stuff like that. So I'm actually doing the work I would do anyway, but I happen to be home doing it, which is fine. Then I have a couple of features which are being cast, and everything has been pushed. So the things that people were going to be doing like, in the spring now are sort of in the fall, if anybody's really shooting in the fall. So we'll see. So my work is now pushed to 2021. But I have to work with these actors. So it's kind of like, but luckily I have this thing that I can at least be working on now. So I do a lot of thinking work and a lot of drawing work and a lot of like image thinking and kind of preparation. So in some ways it's good. I mean, for today I feel a little like I'm going out of my mind, but generally it's good. I mean, it feels like a good time to be able to just have no distractions and just work in a more pure way, so I like it.
Do you think we'll see an influx of stories in the future that are kind of impacted by this time? Or, I think when a big event happens in the world, obviously it influences art. So, what kinds of stories do you guys think we'll be seeing, or how will this moment change, I guess, the future of cinema? You don't have to have the answer, but if you have a wondering on it.
I mean, I'll say it's affected my own filmmaking. Like, for me, the pandemic is like, I mean, it's been 3 months now or something. Like, it's so long. It's such a huge thing that happened, and it's been so long that I feel like it has definitely affected my own filmmaking. And like, for me, the questions of like some of my films, like my film about my mom is kind of me wanting her to feel fulfilled before she dies. And now she's about to be 79, and she's quarantining alone. So the end of her life, her third act, looks different than it did prior to this pandemic. So for me, I definitely can see that it's like changing what I'm writing or making. But I also think that people who are making just straight up narrative are probably like, even if they're going a little more sci-fi or thinking of how to make films or TV or digital series for just two people in a space. Like, I don't know, I can just imagine that it will probably be impacting people. I mean, I also think that all of this, the social change that we're seeing now, which is really, at least, I don't know where everyone's located, but in Brooklyn, it feels like huge and ever present. And I feel like that is also going to have a huge impact. Hopefully, I'm guessing that it's going to have a huge impact on like what things get greenlit and get written and get made. And I don't know, I think it's going to be a really exciting time. So that's what I think. I see a lot of change. I don't see how there couldn't be, but I'm sure there will also still be like some things that are just totally regular, like would have come out no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on too that you brought up earlier is, and Shaina, to you talking about your mom, your films are very personal, and I'm just curious if, you know, is it hard sometimes to be that open as a filmmaker or really expose yourself? Like Rebecca said, they're self-portraits of a sort. You know, tell me a little bit about, because I know Blunderpuss is a little bit of a departure from that. So some of your you know, senior Escort Service is you very exposed. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up, my dad was a therapist and my sister, my brother-in-law are both therapists. So I think actually like it's very normal for me. And I think that it's the way that I process anything that has happened to me, like major things like getting pregnant or my dad dying, or like, I don't know, anything that has happened to me. I've either written about it publicly or made a film about it. And I think that's just like how I process, and that's just what I do. So yeah, I mean, the hardest thing for me is being on camera. I hate seeing myself on camera, but often I find that I wouldn't be able to find like the specific kind of annoying person that I can play so easily. So it's easy for me to do, but it's not that hard for me to share my feelings. Like I just feel like that's what I do, and it feels better when I do it. And even though Blunderpuss is a departure in terms of like I'm not in it and it doesn't like break the fourth wall, it's actually, you know, my husband is sober and he is a clown, and his siblings in the movie are his real life siblings, and every single person they are our friends, and their names are not changed. And so it is actually just exploring like this thing that is real for us, just in a more fictional way. But like a lot of it is sort of like literally just taken from our lives, and barely fictionalized. So it's sort of a departure, but sort of also just still about my feelings about, you know, watching this person become sober and how he had to sort of like invest in himself or like go smaller in order to like stay sober.
What about for you, Rebecca? Do you feel like each of your films is kind of a slice of yourself, or is it, you know, hard to see it out there and kind of look at it almost like as a reflection of what you were going through during that time? Or
I definitely think all my films are very, there's huge parts of myself in the films. I'm very different though, in the sense that I'm quite shy person, and I don't actually, it's not easy for me to, I mean, I'm sociable, but I wouldn't say that it's easy for me to reveal my true emotions in an easy way. So in a way, that's why I make art. So it's like all the emotion is in those pieces, but in a way it's like, one of the joys to me of hiding as an artist is that you get to hide in funny places, like in The Old Man, you know, like you're not necessarily the obvious, you know, or you put different parts of yourself in different people. And that's probably, you know, especially with humor, I find that like I feel better about humor when I feel that I'm not making fun of people, but I'm actually putting a part of myself in them, and that a part of myself that's ridiculous or odious or, you know, stupid in some way, then I feel better about making fun of characters. So, so the answer is, yeah, I do see parts of myself, and I'm actually have been interested recently, and I've written something that's like a historical thing. It's actually about a woman who actually existed in the 18th century, and it took me a really long time to find that character. And in a way, rather than making her me, I had to make me her. So it was like more like I had to start to actually play her in my mind and try to become her, to imagine her, to imagine how she spoke, how she acts. That was really, really very difficult. But ultimately, that's how I had to do it, you know? I think all writers are kind of acting in a way in their heads, you know, when they're writing, so that they can become the characters.
Did you have to, that's what I was going to ask, like, did you, like, in your writing room, did you, like, act it out, kind of, or did you just do it all
in my head? It wasn't really like I was, you know, no, not in a really overt way. I always end up talking, and, you know, I do end up getting, I don't even know what I'm doing when I'm writing, you know, all sorts of things happen, but I mean, like, you know, you get emotionally involved, you cry, you laugh, you know, you're inside of it. So, you know, you have to go inside, like that's my experience anyway, is that you in order to make anyone else believe it, you have to believe it. It just, you know, some characters come to you naturally, like through your feelings, you know, like they just come to you, like if through a radio signal or something. And some characters you have to really, really fight for, at least for me. And some characters you can never get. And like, it's that weird process of like, you're sort of, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's amalgams of people, like you were saying, like, you know, it's a fiction, but it's actually also combinations of people that you know. And then the further away you get from your own experience and your own century, you know, then it starts to make different demands on you. But for me, I can't do it unless I can make it personal in some way. I can't actually do it. And then sometimes that's really a struggle.
By the way, I just want to say, speaking of comedy, I found Maggie's plan to be so funny.
Oh,
I thought it was so funny. And there was like a sort of like vaudevillian or like sort of old school comedy to it that I just really, really enjoyed.
I wanted that people could enjoy it the way that you enjoy older movies, you know, where there's still some performance, you know, that people, that you're not completely taking away the idea that people are performing. It's that funny tone, you know, like, it's like, and Greta was so good at that, I thought.
Yeah.
They were all amazing people to work with.
Yeah. I mean, they're all very, I mean, Julianne Moore and Greta Gerwig are both, to me, very funny. I mean, I love Ethan Hawke too, but those two women I think are really, really funny. And there's like a part when she's like in that nightgown.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just so curious, like, did that happen in the script or did that happen?
Oh, well, like, the nightgown with all when he unbuttons the nightgown.
No, when she's like coming out of she's like walking in this like funny way out of the bathroom. Like,
oh, because she's just inseminated herself.
Yeah.
That was in the script. So that was, the idea was in the script with it, like, the idea of a friend of mine gave me the idea that sometimes, you know, like, I forget exactly what it was, but she read the script and she said, well, I don't know, but I've had sex with more than one person in one day. And I suddenly thought, oh, well, maybe these two things happen in one day. That was my like revelation, that, you know, that it's sort of like the mix that would then mix her up completely. She didn't know whose sperm it was, but so that was in the script. But the thing that wasn't in the script was that long nightgown thing. It was Greta's idea that there would be the many buttons. Like, I always thought she would wear like kind of dowdy nightgowns because she's got that funny style, but that she would have these buttons that would be very, very slow to unbutton. And so that was a collaboration.
Yeah, I really love the walk she does when she's just inseminated herself. It was very funny. I have that image in my brain a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for the digression.
No, this is great. I was going to say, if you guys have other, questions you want to ask each other too.
Well, because in your film in the Senior Escort Service, so like, was that film scripted or completely? Was it scripted through improvisation, or was it like, um, was it feels like it was script, but at the same time, I'm curious because there's so much freedom, formal freedom. So I'm just wondering if you knew where you were going all the way through, or was there kind of surprises, and were you allowing yourself to kind of discover it as you went along?
Well, all the scenes at the dinner table, like with the people telling their different like traumatic experiences, whether they're small, like their dad eating their ice cream, or big, like their dad dying, those were all real stories. Those were like just people. We just invited all these friends of ours to come, and we shot. They just offered us sort of, we documentary style filmed them with 2 cameras. So that was the first thing we shot, and that I had no idea what I was gonna get. And we then, but the idea was that it was like the talking cure, because my dad was a shrink. So the idea was that all these people were gonna come and talk to us. And so that would be cut up throughout the movie, but I didn't know what I was gonna get. That was the first thing we shot, and then after that, the rest of the movie was written and was scripted around it. But I work with the same people like constantly, like they're in everything I do. So I feel like there's some stuff that might feel improvised when it's just that it actually happened for us in real life, so then I put it in there, or I just kind of know what they would say. And then something that happened with me and the 3 boys who I'm on the journey with is that it was like 40 pages that we had to film in 3 days. And they're like my really good friends. I'm married to one of them, and no one knew their lines. So we just like would go from location to location, and I would read the lines to them, and they would just repeat them back, and then we would shoot. So I think that kind of helps it feel a little more improvised, because it wasn't like they had come to it with a specific read and memorized it in a certain way. Like they just came and were like, I would be like, now you say oy vey, and then that person would be like, oy vey, or I don't know, So
Yeah.
kind of, but we did have a script. And we actually had like a much longer movie, and then a friend of mine watched it and said, the first 19 minutes are terrible. So I just lopped off the first 19 minutes, and then I had a much shorter movie. But I felt like it worked better that way.
Yeah. I like the black and white too of your mother. Is that your mother singing?
Yes.
Yeah. That's really, I love that.
Thanks.
I love that part. And all her, it's so funny that like she sings about the wrong emotions, the shy one.
I mean, that's all true. Like for me, like we had filmed this short Shiva, and my mom wrote this like amazing song. And then when I asked her to write 5 more, she just chose all the wrong emotions. So it's like, in some ways, just like for me, I feel like so lucky that the people who I surround myself with are such goofballs. Like that the comedy is just like continually written for me. So like the fact that she would write this song about being shy or success when I'm making a movie about my dad dying is like completely absurd, but it winds up being funny in the movie, so it works. I don't know.
The guy who's in the movie who's playing your dad is not your dad.
He is the one who has my face, basically, like in the blue shirt.
Yeah.
That is my dad, but because I had footage of him from our other movie. And also when we were just trying to learn how to shoot, we filmed a web series with my parents. So I had all this footage of him that we were able to use in the movie. But some people get confused, like the old guy was getting driven by the other woman.
Yeah, no,
That's
he's
not my
obviously,
dad.
no, I didn't think he was. Yeah.
No, the Jewishy guy who looks like Robert De Niro or me or whatever. That is, just like archival footage that we had.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but I just wanted to pose one last kind of thought. you know, you've both mentioned some really great stories from your films, and I think it's a nostalgic moment to think about. Remember when we were on set, and we're all kind of missing that right now. You know, big or small, however big or small your crew was, can you share a story from some time where you really felt like this is it, where this is our family, you know, or just a moment of joy from the process of being on set?
I'm not, you go. I'm not that there have been so many, but I'm not.
Well, your lion story was already
I
very
did
good.
So. Bargain lion.
We have not had a lion. We've had a dog. But no, we filmed in January this season 2 of this digital series we make called Dinette. And on like the second to last day, we filmed a scene that is all women and gender nonconforming people kind of hanging out and peacocking, and like one person is rapping and another person is like sort of break dancing, and someone else is singing, and someone else is just telling jokes. And like, it was this really, for me, this really fun moment. And I was like sitting on the floor with a monitor, and it was just, I don't know, I just felt so happy because I was getting to see all these women and gender nonconforming people in roles that felt like me. Like every single one felt like something I could identify with, as opposed to like how I normally see women in film. And that just felt cool. Like I just felt like every person was funny and fun to watch, and like goofy, and just, I don't know, they just felt real and good. And that was an amazing moment. And I was like, I wish I could do this all the time. Like, I just was really like, I can't wait to have a TV show and get to do this so much. That was an incredible moment for me.
That's awesome. Rebecca, I'm hearing from the Peanut Gallery maybe a story about a snowstorm on Maggie's plan.
Oh yeah, I know which peanut came up with that. Well, so in Maggie's plan, I was, foolish enough to write in that there had to be a snowstorm as a major plot point in my movie, which we all know they don't always come on command. And it was March already when we were shooting. And so I said, look, if it doesn't snow, if there's no snow, we will just say there was a hurricane, because these people have to be snowed in at a conference for academics in Canada, they're supposed to be. And but on our way, we left at 5 o'clock in the morning in the buses to go upstate to shoot. And as we went, we started seeing flurries, and I couldn't believe, it was really snowing, and it was snowing harder and harder and harder. And it was an actual snowstorm, and we actually got to shoot on the mountain in a snowstorm in March. And it was just like so many other things had not gone right, like the financing had fallen through and everything, all sorts of problems happened with that film. And then finally there it was, just like that little blessing.
That's between a snowstorm and a lion. Like, you should maybe just dream bigger about these things.
I know, just dream big and it happened. Yeah, it's true.
That's awesome. Well, I think that was a very inspiring moment to end on. So thank you guys so much. If you have any other thoughts, feel free, but I don't want to take up too much time, and I really appreciate you carving out a moment to jump on with me and have this conversation, and excited to share these wise words with our filmmakers. So thank you guys so much.